Hello, and welcome to the Impact Podcast, where real women talk about real life and we have real fun while creating a winning life team in real time. Change the people you associate with, and you can change your life. On our podcast, we are going to show you how. We're going to help you change your life and have fun while you're doing it.
We are so excited to be together on the Impact Podcast. We've got our three amazing, incredible co-hosts, so four of us all together. Ms. Chantel Boucher in the house.
Hello, hello. Aloha, y'all.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get excited, Chantel, because that's who you are, right?
Yes.
We've got the ultimate optimist and just total sweetheart, heart big as Texas, Leslie Wilson.
Hello, good morning.
We've got Robin Aber, who, as you will find and learn, is the, what did we call her? The what?
Chief diplomat. Chief
The
diplomat.
what?
She is the chief diplomat.
She is the chief diplomat.
Yeah, I'm very diplomatic.
You know what? She never fails to impress me with her skills in that respect. So, Robin, we're so glad to have you on.
Thank you, Jess. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
We are overjoyed to have Dr. Dewey Lee in the house with us because, you know, Dr. Lee, first of all, what I say, and I think all of us, because we all know him, he's 100% on our life team. I think his unique selling proposition, so to speak, is the fact that two things really. One, your diamond matrix philosophy that you created that we are going to touch on today, I'm sure. And then the second is, Dr. Lee, you truly are a partner in people's health. You know, you're not just a physician, you're like a partner. And I don't know about y'all if you feel that same way, but we're just overjoyed. It is our mission to ensure that you become the Dr. Oz of Dallas and beyond, because you're better than Dr. Oz.
Well, you're too kind. You're too kind.
You're better than Dr. Oz. But we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to start asking you some questions about how we can responsibly re-enter and reopen and start Texas as well as outside of Texas.
Sure.
And I'm sure we're going to probably, ask you some other questions as well, because what we want to do on the Impact is obviously provide information and provide a narrative that is unbiased. I mean, good grief, every one of us on this podcast, we have a little different view of what's going on and how it's been handled, but that's okay. You know, it's okay. And that's why we want you, Dr. Lee, to just share with us, in your professional opinion, what we should be doing, how we can be responsible, and really where to go from here.
Right. Okay. Well, so I guess I'm on. Well, this certainly has been, I don't know if I want to say the word revolutionary, but really in many ways it has been, not only medically in terms of, you know, getting a disease process that swept the world literally almost overnight. And with that, just incredible changes medically as well as socially, economically, and it touches every level, I think, of each person's life. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. There are now over 190 countries from last I heard in terms of the extent of the virus infiltrating. So it literally is global. And I think back about when we first heard about this. This is when President Trump shut the country down. It was, end of January. So it's basically been 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's such a blink of an eye, and the world has turned upside down. Certainly, the United States has in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think we're still in the middle of it, and maybe we're starting to peek out from the covers, and then starting to find out, okay, what can we do to actually come out of hiding, literally hiding, and re-enter the world and be able to interact with, everybody the way we used to. You know, when you were hearing things like, I mean, it was yesterday, I was watching TV, and they had Dr. Fauci on, and he was talking about, quote unquote, eliminating handshaking. It's like, wow. I mean, if we're actually thinking about something like that to change a literally a primary way of greeting people around the world. And this is kind of what we do. It doesn't matter where you are. Handshake is really the first gesture of greeting and touch between people. And to think about actually even getting rid of that, something that fundamental, I don't know. You have to really kind of think about, what we're really dealing with and how deep we're getting with that. And hopefully it's not going to come to something like that where it's mandated that you don't shake hands with somebody or hug somebody or the things that we do naturally as we greet each other. But that's the world we're now entering when we're actually having a serious discussion about changing our behavior to that basic level, And this is amazing. Yesterday I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and there was a big article about, sexual relationships between spouses during this time. It's like it's gotten to that level. It's like it's just amazing, to actually see how deeply and profoundly our world has changed because of this infection. And I think this really could have been prevented, and that's a topic for a whole other discussion. And that really is the, I think, profound tragedy behind this, that it didn't have to come to this level. And I think we're going to find out more and more as more data come out from, not only from the political issue, associated with China and the lab and what they did, and all the reactions that has happened since then around the world, and how much of that really is medically and scientifically validated and necessary, and how much of it is sort of overkill and political thing. And I'm sure depending on who you talk to, you're going to get various different types of answers to that. And I don't want to get into the whole political argument. I don't think this is a forum for that. So I'm going to try to stay as scientific and medical as I can. Of course, I have my own personal biases about this as well, and some of them may spill out. Probably can't help it. But I'll try to limit that as much as possible and keep it medical. Mm-hmm. So as far as re-entering the world, let's say, okay, the big question really has to do with, where are we? I mean, personally, I don't know if any of you knows the status of quote unquote infection. Maybe some of you has any kind of symptoms, or you think about, okay, I was sick, a couple of months ago, I had this, I had that. And as I talk to different people always relate to me a story. Well, I think I had this, I had that. I must have coronavirus back then. But the whole point is no one really knows, for the people who have not been tested, what the status is. And if you were tested, let's say, a couple of weeks ago or a month ago with a nasal swab, which is still sort of the gold standard, and you were negative at that time, well, you could have caught the virus since then, because that's a point of time test, and it doesn't really predict whether you can catch the virus or not. So actually, for that reason, I'm actually starting the antibody testing. Antibody testing is not a quote-unquote diagnostic test, it's a screening test. But I decided to do this in my office because obviously it puts me and my staff at risk, but I thought it was very important service to offer, certainly for all my patients and their associates and family members, because of exactly that reason. You need a perspective. You have to have some sort of foundation, some grounding to know, where am I? Am I infected? Did I catch it 6 months ago or 3 months ago or 2 months ago? Do I have the antibody, or am I completely negative? I don't have no trace of any of the antibodies, which means I'm completely vulnerable. Or do I have the long-term IgG antibody, and therefore I may have some protection? But I think having that information is really important to figure out how do we actually individually, and also even with a close relationship with your family members, how do we actually interact, and what are the steps can we take to re-enter the world? And I think having that knowledge is critical to make sure that you take the right kind of decisions and do the proper behavior. And I think that information will give you that some sense of direction. And so that's the main reason I'm doing this. And not only for myself, but also for my staff and all the people. I don't know if any of you has gotten tested for hosts, and hopefully, get that information. So
we're going to come and get tested by you, Dr. Lee.
Yeah, I think some of you are on the list. Exactly. So hopefully they'll give you some idea of where you are and how to proceed from here.
So, one of the things I think, there's so much different information out there.
Yes.
And, to me, I think there's I don't know about you ladies, and I want to hear from all you ladies, because to me, I'm coming across two different types of mindsets. There's one mindset, or maybe three. There's one mindset that's like, hey, listen, let's just go back. Life is usual, and the people that are going to get it are going to get it. The people that are going to die from it are going to die from it, and we got to get moving. Then I come across people that they're scared. I mean, they are still scared. They don't want to leave their house. They are scared to be around and interact with other people. They're the ones that are like, hey, I want to shake your hand, and so you've got those two extremes. Then I think you've kind of got the middle of the road where people say, hey, look, you got to weigh the good with the bad. Every life is important, whether they're dying from corona or they're dying from cancer or they're dying from everything, but I want to be responsible. I want to be responsible as I go back entering in. And, it's like there's so many different, numbers that you're getting. And on one hand, it's saying, okay, it's more dangerous than the flu, more deadly. Now you've got this Stanford study coming out with the antibodies test that's saying it's substantially less deadly, but still, so how do people responsibly re-enter? Number one, go get tested with the antibodies test. Number two, continue to wash your hands and all that stuff. Other than getting the antibodies test and washing your hands, Dr. Lee, what are some tips that you think, this is just no-brainer stuff, everybody go and do it?
Yeah. So I think those two are critical. I think the antibody test really gives you the foundation and some perspective on which you can base your decisions about what to do, how to interact with each other. Like like you said, shaking hands, not shaking hands, walking out of the house, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really more of a scientific basis, and it's got its own flaws too, and nothing's perfect. But I'm trying to find some technique that will give you as much information and some solid grounding to make some wise decisions as that is available we have. And they really don't have much more than these tests that we have. And as far as I know, antibody testing, this is a FDA cleared test, so it's valid and it's high quality and all those kind of things. But no test gives you 100% answers. There's always what's called false positive, false negative, and all kind of deal with it and do the best you can. And now that you mentioned, Jens, the Stanford study, that's really the sort of new talk of town now, because they've gone and tested with antibodies 3,330 people in Clara County of various different demographics. They actually went there and advertised on Facebook, and got different people of different zip codes and age and race and all those kind of things. Try to mix it up as much as they can. So I think they've done a lot of things that are actually very good to get a decent sampling of the population to test. And based on that, what they found is the prevalence rate of the disease, and that is the number that kind of gives you an estimate of where the disease is. Okay, it has nothing to do with your symptoms. This is actually antibodies in the bodies of people who have had contracted the virus, and they may have had symptoms, they may not, but at the present time of the test, they really don't have necessarily the symptoms. But regardless of all that, the prevalence based on their calculation and extrapolation is, this is a wide range, 50 to 85 times more than the numbers that have been talked about with the modeling that's going on. And the modeling that, I'm sure a lot of you probably see this every day or every other day, that the President Trump coming out and Fauci and Dr. Birx talking about the number of people dying and that graphs up and down and flatten the curve. So that's all based on mathematical modeling, based on some suppositions. So based on this Stanford study, those numbers, what they were basing all this lockdown and everything on, is really quite a bit off. So based on their modeling, they were talking about a prevalence rate of death rate of 3, 4, 5%, 250. Initially, it was 2.2 to 3 million people dying. And after a few days, they changed to 200 to 300,000 people dying, which was horrendously high. Now they're down to less than 60,000, okay? But with this new model of Stanford, it's actually saying it's probably even lower than that, which is amazing, because I remember when this first started, somebody actually sent around a little poll saying, what do you think is a prediction of people dying in the States? And I said less than 50,000. So maybe I was overly optimistic, but based on my, I don't know, looking at it and my gut feeling and looking at the numbers and how disease is progressing, I thought, we're not going to have that many deaths in this country. We're just not. So I put less than 50,000. So maybe I'm correct. And, hopefully it will be, because we don't want that many people to die.
So much of that is testing, though. I mean, the more widespread the testing, the more we can find out who's had it.
Exactly.
That makes the number of deaths actually really come down.
More realistic.
Percentage. I mean,
okay.
Percentage, certainly,
yeah.
but even to your number. And so what are your thoughts about the rollout and the procedures for rolling out? You've got access to the testing, but what about other people?
I think, obviously, I'm not the only one doing this. I think I'm one of the early ones doing it, but
Yes.
there's obviously other people doing that. So the whole idea really is, as we get more of this antibody testing, that is going to kind of give you a more accurate picture of what they call the denominator, okay? The real number that is important is not the case death rate. Okay, what that is that if you get sick, you get infected, you get sick, you go into the hospital or whatever, and you die. So obviously the case death rate is going to be much, much higher, because that's a very small group of people, right? Well, infection death rate is what we're really talking about, is the actual population that is infected but not ill, okay? So there's a big difference. Just because you get the virus doesn't mean you're ill, okay? So one idea is, like in our gut, we have tons of bacteria in our gut. But that bacteria does not make us ill. We're not diseased from that, okay? Still silly example maybe, but if you had the virus, you can actually even have the antibodies for it. You've been infected, but you didn't get ill from it, and certainly you didn't die, okay? But that infection number is a true prevalence and penetration of the disease into the population. And we're talking about the herd number, right? You got to have the certain herd infection to reach 50, 60%, then everybody's protected, because there's less chance for the virus to bounce from person to person. So let's say I'm infected, and Jens, you're completely not infected, right? And if I go and talk to you, a cough, or have symptoms, then you can get infected because you don't have the antibodies, right? But if you actually had the infection, have the antibodies, even if I get infected, if I'm infected and talk to you, chance of you getting sick is very, very, very low, or almost zero, right? So when you have more people like you who have the antibodies, that is a herd protection we're talking about. So as more people get the virus, get over it, or don't even realize you had it, and as the population number of that situation increases, then the virus can't go anywhere. It knocks on the door, says, well, you can come in, but you're not going to grow, you're going to die. Okay, that's how the herd, or the whole thing about the herd percentage is so important. And the population has to go through this, and there's no way to prevent this. And the whole idea of lockdown was not necessarily to prevent this herd protection, but to slow it down, so you don't have literally 50 to 100,000 people dead or dying in this country and literally overwhelming every hospital bed in the country. That's the reason, the rationale behind this lockdown. It's not going to change the course of nature in a sense of the virus propagating through the United States and the rest of the world. It's already done that. We're just trying to kind of give us some time to say, okay, you're going to do what you're going to do, but we're going to slow you down so we have time to respond. And so not everybody gets literally, inundated, and we're able to manage the people who are, ill. And of course, a certain percentage of those people die, and that's just part of what happens with the disease. But, it's going to sweep through. And eventually, a lot of people, as we come out of this, there's going to be a small spike of new people getting infected, because that's just the nature of it. And question has to do with what is the curve and the peak of that new infection, and is this something that we can deal with? So from my estimation, looking at it from, as a doctor and also even as a citizen, but looking at the whole progression of the disease in the hot zones, especially in New York City, that's obviously the major area we talk about. Certainly in California, like LA, Chicago, even Louisiana, there are certain hot spots, and how they've actually coped with this. Now, this is going to go into a little bit of a politics and whatnot. And so, the New York first, raised the alarm. We all know this. I mean, Governor Cuomo going in every day, we need more ventilators, we need this, we need that. It's President Trump shut the ship. And I mean, all these hospitals are on lockdown, and they say, well, you can't treat anything other than, COVID-19, coronavirus. Everything coming in has to be coronavirus. But what the reality is there are a few hospitals that were inundated. But now the reality is there's so many hospitals that are literally empty. They're closing down, they're firing and furloughing medical staff because there's not enough business. Okay? So even though these hospitals have, restricted access only to COVID patients, there's not enough of them. The ship that can handle 1,000 beds, only 22 from what I heard, maybe it's higher, but only 22 coronaviruses have been sent to that ship. I mean, think about that. So the supply was become, the capacity to take care of these people has been increased to such an extent they're literally shutting down hospitals. When you go outside New York City, in the rural areas in New York, it's completely opposite. It's like any rural state, like South Dakota or wherever. There are not that many people, and the hospitals are basically empty. Okay, so we're basing our decisions of lockdown and all those kind of things based on the certain hotspots on which there's a great demand. And I understand that. So you want to, look at the worst case scenario, but the reality really is not those few select worst case scenarios. And I think that's the big problem with which I have as a doctor and a scientist, and certainly even as a citizen, that how are we overreacting to this? I mean, I understand the initial models. Initial models, I think, were deeply flawed. And based on some crazy numbers coming out of China, and who knows how accurate they were. So I understand the initial modeling, but the modeling was turned down very, very quickly over a matter of days. Now that with the Stanford study coming in, and that's not a perfect study either, it's got its flaws and whatnot. And even though you talk about 50 to 85 times prevalence, well, let's say the data taking is erroneous. It's not 50 times, but it's only 40 times. Well, even 40 times is a huge number. That changes the denominator by a factor of 10. So if you're talking about 1%, 2%, disease, infection, death rate, that will bring it down to 0.2, 0.1. Do you see the difference? So that completely flips the narrative of why are we actually doing this draconian lockdowns and kind of things that we're doing to people, to businesses, and everything that we're doing. Okay, so as we come out of this, the question has to do with, okay, so we have more than likely much greater penetrance of disease in the population. So chances are, if you go and meet somebody, there's a very good chance that you're going to talk to somebody who's already had a disease. You yourself may have had a disease, and that's going to tell you that after doing the antibody test. But okay, so there are a couple of ways to do this. The reason I'm doing this is that there are 4 different options with the antibody test. Okay, let's say, Jens, you come in, and I do a test on you, and let's say you are completely negative. You don't have IgM, you don't have IgG, okay? Well, you're like a virgin petri dish, okay? So if you encounter somebody with an infection...
I know I'm not a virgin.
Well, no, okay, poor choice of words. You're talking about, okay. So anyway, you know what I'm talking about, okay? You're pure, so you're going to be like infected.
Oh, yeah, she's pure.
So there's a chance that you can get infected because you don't have the virus, you don't have the antibody, right? So you're at a risk. So I would suggest, in fact, when you come in, I would, if that's the case, I would make my medical recommendations okay, so you have no exposure. You actually have a risk of contracting it. So you do need to keep the distance. You need to think about the mask. You need to wash your hands, okay? Because you are actually very vulnerable because you don't have that. Unless you want to say, okay, hell with it. I'm going to take my chances, get infected, go through it, and I'll probably be fine. Well, that's your option, but you have that, you're at that stage. So, but let's say you have IgM. If you're at the IgM, depending on the level, you probably had the virus, and now you're developing the initial antibodies, and you could be infectious. Okay, you could actually infect somebody because you're at that phase. And that's the case, I'll say, okay, you need to wear a mask. You definitely need to keep social distancing because you need to protect others from you. You see what I'm saying? So that's another scenario. If you're in the mixture of IgM and IgG, okay, IgM is a short-term antibody, IgG is a long-term antibody, then you're in the middle of changing from acute disease to chronic. The acute phase is going down, which means the disease is starting to go away, and your body is developing the long-term antibodies. You may still be infectious for, let's say, another week or so, because that's about the time frame. And I'll say for next week, 10 days, continue to isolate yourself and protect others from possibly getting your virus, okay? If you're purely IgG, which is the 4th option, which is what I hope everybody gets, is, well, you had the virus, You've had it a long time ago, several weeks ago. Your body fought it. It's won. You have a long-term antibody against this virus. Chance of you contracting that again is virtually nil. I cannot say zero because nobody really knows. But, it's like any disease. The reason we vaccinate children, whatever, is because we develop long-term antibodies, right? There's herpes vaccine, there's rubella, there's all the kind of vaccines that we use. So if, as you grow up, if you get that disease again, you're not going to catch that and convert that illness, right? So that's a long-term antibody. We don't really know if that applies to this coronavirus, but my thinking is, well, our body does that to every other infectious agent that we know of. Why would it not do that with coronavirus? I don't know, but there's always an exception. So I can't tell you you're 100% whatever, but I can reasonably say chance of you recontracting the coronavirus is very, very low. So if you're a little lax in your masks and all that, it's probably not going to be as critical. You see what I'm saying? Now,
Right.
there's a social pressure for you to wear a mask and regardless, which is completely a whole different story. So I don't want to get into all that stuff. But as far as from purely biological, physiological interactions of being affected by somebody who's ill or giving it to somebody, chance of that is very, very low. Okay,
Right.
virtually zero.
I love the explanation that you just gave, Dr. Lee. And really, if you are sincerely wanting to be the utmost responsible with the re-entry, you really should go get the antibodies.
Yeah, I think so. And,
Leslie, I think Leslie had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, that was actually very encouraging for me to hear you say that because, there's been so much miscommunication. There have been misunderstandings about people that are talking about being able to contract this virus again.
Right.
And so that was my question actually for you. Is this something like you get chickenpox when you're a kid,
Right.
but you don't ever get chickenpox again?
Exactly.
But there are certain things that you do get over and over again. So I think that this is very encouraging with the knowing that your body can fight against this for the future. Here's going to be my eternal optimism coming out, I think. But, I'm a firm believer in my faith, and I know that our days are numbered. And so, and I don't mean that to sound flippant as far as, and I will do my best to keep my distance from people if I need to. And I've started washing my hands. I keep hand sanitizer all the time now.
Right.
So I'm doing those things like that. But I have not allowed fear to take over in this instance. And so I think that that's very encouraging for people to know that, hey, your body can fight this. The majority of people do recover and they get well and they go on to live a normal life. And at some point we will get back to normal. But I thank you for sharing that part with us.
Well, that's great. No, I think what you're saying is very, very important. I'd like to kind of take from what you just said about our bodies being able to fight this infection. Okay. And that really is the critical issue here because the vulnerable population really are the elderly, and people with other illnesses, because that naturally reduces your immune system. So you don't have enough, capacity to fight this virus or even any other virus for that matter. And so then, Jen's mentioned, the diamond matrix in the beginning, excuse me, and that really has to do with exactly what you talked about, improving your health, improving your core baseline health, elevating as much as possible, and thereby improving your immune system, right? So this question has to do with, okay, so what are we going to do? I mean, you can take all the medications, all the drugs. We're all waiting for this vaccine. Vaccine is going to be talking about 18 months to 24 months. But, what's interesting about viral vaccines is for this strain, when the virus mutates, that vaccine is no longer really, valid. So, my thinking is vaccines is great, but, next year you're going to have a different strain of coronavirus or who knows what virus. Every year there's a different strain of flu, right? Everybody gets flu vaccines, right? The reason for that is constantly changes and mutates. Well, this coronavirus is going to mutate as well until it literally dies off, and who knows what's going to happen to that. So we can't wait for the vaccine. I can't wait for the vaccine. I can't tell my patients to wait for the vaccine because it makes absolutely no sense. And the idea of what Fauci is talking about, wait for Bill Gates' vaccine for 2 years and then we're going to shut the whole country and the world down for 2 years. I mean, that is the most ludicrous idea. I'm sorry, it's my personal opinion. Ludicrous idea because there's so much more to life than just literally locking yourself and not getting anything. The world will be decimated if that happens. So in the meantime, what do? So let's say, you have, you're completely IgM and IgG negative. You have nothing. So you're actually very vulnerable. Well, so there are ways to protect yourself. All the things we talk about, eating well, improving your nutrition, healthy, exercise, sleeping well. Okay. And then all the other things, and getting your emotional status, improving that. I'm glad, let's say you're an emotional, the classic optimist, because that really boosts your dopamine, and all the good hormones and chemicals in your body that makes you healthy are associated with happiness and being optimistic. If you're down and sad and depressed and whatnot, your body literally changes to become less healthy. It's amazing, but your emotion has that much influence in your overall health. So keeping, a solid positive outlook, looking at the sunshine and never looking at the, dark side of things, and being able to find the silver lining in every situation. All those positive things that you do really do have a significant influence in a positive way for your body and for your health. And then the other things we talk about, obviously, there's a whole brain health thing I do. There's many different points to it. There are 7 different aspects to total health. But first, thing that you really have control over personally is, number 1, your nutrition. All the things like vitamin D, vitamin C, all the good foods, all the healthy things you can do, and exercise, and walking around and whatever. I know some people are locked down; they literally cannot leave the house. But even in the house, you can actually exercise. There are tons of things now in YouTube of the exercises that you can do at home. A lot of calisthenics and things that we kind of forget about because we're all used to going to the gym. But there's so many exercises you actually can do at home. And for those of us who can actually go out to a park and walk around, you can actually run and jog and, ride bikes and whatnot. So exercise is very important. Meditation, yoga, all those kind of things. Again, improving your mind and body connection. For those of you who actually have ways to get out and go see doctors, there are other things you can do in terms of regenerative medicine. One of the things that are out there is actually stem cell treatments to actually boost your immunity. That's what stem cells do, is improve your cellular health, your physiologic health, improve your ways to fight viruses and other illnesses. So there's something else to consider. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is also another techniques, and from regenerative medicine standpoint, optimizing your hormones and all the things that make your body stronger and improve and optimize your health. Those are all part of the strategies that you actually can do without necessarily resorting to the vaccine, which is, again, far and far away. Now, this kind of brings back the idea of what tools do we have to fight the illness, okay? I've been a proponent of hydroxychloroquine from day one, okay? As soon as I heard about this, as soon as I started researching and found out about this drug, which has been around almost 70 years, there's so many people around the world take it. It's dirt cheap. It's less than 6 cents a pill. It's ridiculously cheap and very available, right? But now they kind of control it to make it less available. But this drug is very unique. The reason I like it is because it kind of goes around the idea of bacterial mutation, okay? So the coronavirus is like a ball with little spikes coming out, right? When it mutates, the proteins on those spikes change. So the antibodies that were able to kill the virus now is not able to recognize the new protein in the spikes. So it's be able to roam around free and infect you. That's how the mutations occur, especially with coronavirus. Well, what's interesting is the hydroxychloroquine changes the acidity of your cell. Okay, it actually lowers the acidity, makes it more acidic. So even though coronavirus goes in and attacks the cell to try to replicate using your cell's RNA mechanism, right? That's how the viruses replicate. Well, it cannot enter the cell because the pH of the cell is not conducive to the virus. So my thinking is, even if the virus mutates and your antibodies can't kill it, hydroxychloroquine will protect your cell so the virus cannot really enter the cell to replicate. So that's my thinking. It's not scientifically proven, it's all that, but based on the research papers I've read and how the mechanism of action of this medication and what the viruses do, I thought, okay, this will probably give you a higher type of protection than just the antibody and the vaccines themselves because of that. So, okay, that's controversial. I know there's studies coming out. Some say yes, some say no. But I know there are more stories of people getting better with hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, go ahead, Chantal.
Yeah, with what you just said, with that particular medication, and I think I heard somebody also talk about azithromycin.
Yes. Okay, so the combination is twofold. I'm sorry?
I think I've even heard of people taking a combination of those two things.
Right. So the way I approach this is the combination works if you're actually ill. Okay, if you have fever, you have cough. Okay, so the hydroxychloroquine affects the virus. It's an antiviral drug. Okay, and by as I just explained to you, affects the cell. The erythromycin comes in to help you fight the bacteria, which is a secondary infection from the virus. People, the reason you get the pneumonia is the virus goes in, increases your inflammatory reaction. Your body responds to inflammation by secreting fluid, so fluid fills up in your lungs. Well, what bug does not like little fluid in a nice warm body? So that fluid becomes a medium for the bacteria to proliferate. That's how you get pneumonia. So the Z-Pak, azithromycin, comes in, kills the bacteria. So that's why the combination is effective. One affects the virus, and the azithromycin affects the bacteria to alleviate the infection.
Yeah, so then it doesn't progress it doesn't progress any further into.
Exactly, it stops the pneumonia. I mean, of course, I prescribe Z-Pak for patients with, cough and, viral pneumonia, infection, bronchitis, etc. That's how that works. That's why the combination is so effective. For those of you who are let's say, Jens, you come in, you're tested IgM positive. Okay, you have no symptoms, you're not coughing, no fever. You're just like, oh, you have IgM positive. I would immediately put you on hydroxychloroquine. Z-Pak, okay, I may give it to you and say, well, you don't have to take it right now because you don't have any pulmonary infectious symptom. If you start coughing, start taking it right away. But until you convert to an infectious process, you don't need to take that azithromycin. Okay, does it make sense?
Right,
so they serve two different purposes.
It makes complete sense, and I love it that we're discussing just the foundation so people can understand. But one of the things that I just thought of is how important it is that you have a healthcare professional, a physician like you, Dr. Lee, that is on your life team that that you trust, because obviously you're the first person that we're going to contact, and we have, because my son up in Salt Lake City was tested positive, and my husband was up in Salt Lake City, and Dr. Lee is the first person I
We're
call.
gonna find out. We'll find out shortly.
What makes me, because I'm always about how can we help other people. Well, to me, one of the biggest things we can do is, if you're watching this and you don't have a physician on your life team that you know and that you trust, that is sincerely a partner in your health, you got to get one. And, I know it's easy for us to say because we got Dr. Lee, but what about people that aren't in our neck of the woods that do want to go get an antibodies test? How do they go and find a place to go get one?
That's a good question. I mean, it's becoming very hard to actually get the test kits now because larger and larger corporations are getting it. And it's just huge demand. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, I was able to procure 200 kits. Probably going to run through that over the next couple of weeks, and then I'll see if I can get more. But I'm not really a big blown up testing center. This is really sort of a service I'm trying to offer to my first layer of patients and associates, let's say, okay, and then maybe I can take it to another level after that. But then again, that's really more of a I don't know what to say, sort of a contained service, for the people that I deal with at a primary level. But it's going to get done more and more. It's just only a matter of time. And again, the rationale for that is something that I already spoke of earlier. But I think you just have to be able to talk to your primary care doctors, whoever your primary care doctors are, and call and talk to them and see how they feel about it, what their philosophy is. Obviously, I have my own philosophy of how I approach this disease and how I see it, how I've kind of researched the papers that I think are pertinent, from medication to the virus itself, and testing and what those things mean, to try to formulate a sort of a rounded perspective from various angles, so I can actually educate the patients as much as I can, and hopefully provide as accurate of information as I could find to really put you on a sort of the straight path to staying healthy and, if infected, recover and expeditiously. So that's just been my approach with it. And political statements aside, just looking at it from scientifically, I think the kind of level of the quarantining and shutdowns that we are doing right now, I just don't see the medical science, just from my own side, backing that up. It just doesn't make any sense to have such a draconian reaction to where literally even couples driving in a car together have to wear masks. I mean, this is kind of crazy stuff.
Let me interject something here really quick.
Can I drive in the car with Dave? Because he's asking me.
Yeah.
I said, you got to get tested.
I have a childhood friend who lives in Sweden, and that's exactly what they've been doing. They're doing nothing in that country.
I know. And what's interesting is there are studies
coming out. They're just completely ascribing to herd mentality.
Exactly.
It's just interesting because his viewpoint is completely like, whoa, I live in Sweden, we're not doing anything. And he grew up here. But,
yeah. But the thing is, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because this virus is going to do what it's going to do. I mean, even if you isolate yourself, let's say you live in a cave for 3 months during this, you come out, well, you're going to catch the virus.
Right.
And you're going to find somebody who doesn't have the antibodies, you're going to infect that person.
Right.
The virus is going to do what it's going to do until it hits the wall and dies off, okay?
Right. But I like your idea of having, the importance, I agreed with it. It may be forever with a vaccine, and then the vaccine, like the flu, has to continue to be, reworked. Yeah. But being able to have a sane medical approach when people do get sick, you want to have treatments available, and to me that's way more important, to have treatments, and that's what they're working on in Sweden. That made sense to me.
Exactly.
Regardless of the science that backs that up, it was just seemed like a level-headed approach that they're really focused on treatment.
Exactly. I think treatment is for me is second line. First line is your own health. Optimize your own health. That's the first line.
Yeah, okay? Good point.
Because if your body can fight it off, you don't need treatment, because you're treated it yourself. Your body is strong enough. So that's why the whole thing with diamond matrix and immunity and all the stuff I just talked about, that comes into play, because you want to make sure you're as healthy and strong as possible. And there are things we can take, high dose of vitamin C and all those kind of things, we can go into to help you kind of, prepare for something like that. And then if that fails, then okay, well, then the first line after that will be something like the hydroxychloroquine and other antivirals that are coming out. And, we'll see how quickly that's going to come out. The remdesivir that President Trump kind of, allowed the FDA to kind of do a quick, green light through, is an antiviral drug. It has a lot of side effects. It's very effective. There was a research paper I read about, that was almost 10 years ago, that they compared the hydroxychloroquine against 9 or 10 other antiviral drugs. And the viral death rate, okay, the mortality, the killing rate of the virus by hydroxychloroquine was just as high, okay, same curve as the antivirals, with virtually zero side effects in the terms we're talking about. I know there's lots of media on and on about, virus, the hydroxychloroquine side effects, including blindness and, kidneys and liver and all kinds of stuff. None of those people that talk about it seem to have read the studies that talk about, yeah, you can get those things. Yeah, nothing's, purely benign, but you have to take high doses. High doses, you're talking about 600-800 milligrams a day for many years, okay? Especially the blindness thing. I mean, it's like, I read this, like, I don't even remember coming across this thing. So I went and did some research and looked at the papers they're talking about. They go on and on about, the retinal damage and blindness and all this kind of stuff. And towards the back of the discussion, they say, oh, by the way, you have to take high doses for about 4 or 5 years, then the retina will get damaged.
I have a friend who takes it now for rheumatoid arthritis.
Exactly, but they take low doses, 200, 400 milligrams a day, which is a low dose. Exactly. You don't. I mean,
she's not blind. She's been taking it for years.
You don't get the. You don't have to be intubated. I mean, there's a rheumatologist in New York who is a world-known authority on rheumatoid arthritis, and he said, I've treated thousands of patients over 30 years with hydroxychloroquine. Never once did I send a patient to the hospital with cardiac or pulmonary or renal abnormalities. No one's gone blind. This just doesn't happen with the routine use of this medication. That's how safe it is. Okay. Well, doesn't mean, okay, me taking or somebody else thinking you won't get that side effect. You can't say that, but the probability of that happening is extremely low. And I always tell people, listen, if you're really that worried, go and read the description of Tylenol. How many of us open up a pack of Tylenol, throw that paper and toss in the garbage? You never look at it, right? Well, I tell you, it lists all the chemistry of that medicine. And it's got things like liver disease. That's the chief problem, People who try to kill themselves with Tylenol, bad idea. They don't die. They kill their liver. You're taking mega doses of Tylenol. You can kill your kidneys and you kill your liver. But liver disease, liver failure, and cirrhosis is a side effect, a risk of taking Tylenol. So what if all of a sudden this media started talking, oh my God, people are talking about Tylenol and they're, this person is a quack because Tylenol causes liver disease and you're prescribing liver disease, medicine to patients and whatnot. Yeah, they blow that up and people go, oh my God, I can't take Tylenol anymore. Well, if you actually look at the studies, they realize it doesn't happen with normal routine doses of Tylenol.
Well,
so this is sort of the analogy that we're talking about with hydroxychloroquine.
Right. I think that, to close things up, number one, we just love you, Dr. Lee, and we're so appreciative to have you come on and share what you shared. I love the fact that you said, our first line of defense is always optimizing our health. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think, in my opinion, what I've been screaming this whole time, because I'm a firm believer in that. Another thing I think is vitally important is explaining to people what it is they can do. But also, you do need to connect with a healthcare provider that you trust and that and start having these conversations. And if you don't have one and you're in the area of Dallas, Fort Worth, Dr. Lee's available. But I know there are amazing physicians all over. Go and research, talk to your GPs, talk to your friends. Find somebody that you can connect with so you get that information. And, and what I will say is, like Leslie, let's be optimistic, let's be responsible, let's be kind, and let's be loving and do what makes the most sense for you as an individual. Keep yourself safe, keep others safe, but we're good people. Do the right thing because we're good people. So, I don't know if the ladies have anything else they want to ask before we close it up. We know you've got to go and see patients.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Anyone?
Thank you so much for having me. It's quite an honor. I appreciate the invitation and certainly a pleasure.
We'll definitely have you back in studio when we're able to get back in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do that.
And we will pick your brain about all the brain work that you're doing, because that's phenomenal, and everything else that you do at the Diamond Matrix. So thank you so much, Dr. Lee. From all of the hosts here at the Impact, we just can't thank you enough for all that you do for us and the community at large. So until we meet again, everybody, be big, be bold, and most importantly, be you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to our YouTube or iTunes channel so you never miss an episode, or visit our website, theimpactdallas.com, to connect with us more.